After my system romance mission failed, I returned to my original world. I got married and had a child. Until 7 years later, the system tracked me down. The mental state of your original target is highly unstable. And your first child is crying, demanding to see you. Host, could you go back and take one last look? I hadn't been in contact with the system for years. When it finally reappeared, my husband, David, and I were walking back from the amusement park with our son. Noah was tugging at my hand, whining for McDonald's for dinner. I was just about to scold him and tell him he'd had enough burgers for the week, when suddenly a familiar electronic hum echoed in my ear. Then came the system's robotic voice. Post long time no see. It looked at our happy family of 3 and seemed to choke up, unsure of how to begin. It's like this. Do you remember that novel transmigration mission from years ago? Ever since you left, the target's mental state has been steadily deteriorating. He's incredibly unstable now. And the son you gave birth to back then, he's crying and demanding to see you. Could you go back and check on the two of them? I froze to say I had forgotten that part of my life would be a lie. Back then, I had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. I had less than 3 years to live. During the most agonizing phase of my treatment, I was bound to this romance system. I was pulled into an angst-filled second chance romance novel. My mission was to win the heart of the devoted second male lead. As long as he abandoned his entanglement with the male and female leads and agreed to marry me, my mission would be a success. I would be allowed to stay in that world, in that body forever. If I returned to my original world, I didn't have much time left anyway, so I cherished the opportunity. When Arthur was ultimately rejected by the female lead, Chloe, I stayed by his side. I comforted him. I kept him company. Slowly, his cold demeanor toward me softened into something gentle and attentive. Later, after a messy drunken night, I got pregnant. I thought that was it. I thought we were going to get married. But his tone suddenly turned ice cold. Samantha, you come from nothing. I can't marry you yet. The child, once he grows up a bit and the family officially accepts him, then we'll get married. That was my first child. I named him Leo. I poured all my blood, sweat, and tears into raising him. The Sterling family was a billionaire dynasty. They controlled dozens of publicly traded companies and had their hands in countless industries. Arthur was the eldest son. Even though I was looked down upon, Leo, as the eldest grandson, was highly valued by the entire family. Almost every week, he was chauffeured back to the family manor, so his grandparents could dote on him. By his first birthday, his first trust fund had already been established. When he was 3 or 4, I was still used to calling an Uber to take him out, but Leo could already distinguish between the bespoke leather interiors of a Rolls-Royce and a Bentley. When he was 5 or 6, I held him in my lap and tried to teach him basic addition and subtraction. He suddenly threw his pencil down. He looked up at me. I'm going to inherit the company anyway. What's the point of learning this? I never expected words like that to come out of a little child's mouth. That day, I gave him a long, stern lecture. Leo threw a massive tantrum and cried. Unable to watch, Arthur intervened and took him back to the main estate. The father and son didn't return to our apartment for a long time. The next time I saw them, months had passed. I had packed a homemade lunch and went to the estate to pick Leo up, planning to apologize and tell him mommy had been too harsh. Instead, I watched him step out of a sleek, black luxury SUV. His left hand was holding Arthur's, and his right hand was holding the hand of a woman in designer heels. In a sweet, childish voice, I heard him say, Chloe, you should marry my dad. My mom and dad are married anyway, so you can marry him. I stood frozen in place, clutching the lunchbox. Chloe was the female lead of this world. After going around in circles, she had come back. She tilted her head, sneaking a glance at Arthur, and smiled. Why don't you want your mommy and daddy to be together? Leo hesitated. But grandpa and grandma don't like my mom. And dad doesn't like her either. Arthur remained completely silent. His expression was blank. He didn't say a single word. I really should have seen it coming. I had just been harboring a pathetic, naive fantasy that things would somehow get better. But they didn't. The devoted second male lead would always be drawn back to the female lead. Even the child I gave birth to was no exception. It made me look like an absolute joke. I didn't speak to anyone. I just turned around and walked away. That night, I rebooted the system. I forfeit this mission. I want to go home. The system was utterly shocked by my decision to quit host. Why? Even if the target won't marry you, you can just wait it out. As long as he doesn't marry anyone else, you can stay here indefinitely. I thought of the way Leo had looked up at Chloe. I let out a self-deprecating laugh. Honestly, with the female lead back in the picture, given Arthur's personality, he would undoubtedly choose to be with her eventually. I might as well return to reality. Who knows, if I catch my cancer early enough, I might be able to squeeze out a few more years. Being my resolve. The system's usually flat mechanical voice let out a heavy sigh. Understood. Give me a moment, host. I'll submit an appeal to my superiors and see if I can help you out. When it returned, a full night had passed. This time the system's volume was noticeably louder. Host, my appeal was approved. You can go home. You'll return to the exact moment you first transmigrated. Here I pulled all the mission points you earned. Here I bought some of my own personal savings from past jobs. And bought you a perfectly healthy body. So when you go back, your cancer will be completely cured. Don't worry. I was stunned. I asked instinctively, you used your own points. Don't you get in trouble? The system hummed dismissively. It's fine. We're supposed to build good relationships with our hosts anyway. If I ever need a favor in the future, I might have to bother you. True to its word, after I returned to the real world, the system cured my cancer. I lived life like a normal person. I met a man I loved and who loved me, and I had my second child. The system never appeared again until today. Its tone was incredibly defeated. The main issue is that the kid, Leo, is showing severe signs of walking down a dark path. He's 13 now, but his mindset is bizarrely mature and detached. He's completely isolated and has no friends. We're terrified he's going to grow up into a major villain. So we want to beg you, host, could you please go back and just keep him company for 1 month? I thought back to the day I abandoned the mission. If the system hadn't used its own points to petition its superiors, for me, I might not even be alive right now. So even though I deeply, truly did not want to return to that world, I decided to say yes. But I said I have to discuss this with my husband first. After all, I'm married now. The system immediately agreed. Yes, of course. I'll wait for you. My husband, David, knew all about this chapter of my life. He was an architect. He was also my boss. Before we officially started dating, I had confessed the entire story of my transmigration to him. So when he heard the word system, he didn't look surprised. He just stopped chopping vegetables. He looked at me, his breathing hitching slightly. Sam, you're going back. Will you not come back? I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around his waist, pressing my face into his chest. I could hear the rapid, anxious thud of his heart. I am coming back, I said fiercely, my voice muffled against his shirt. I have a life here. I have Noah. I have you. That world is nothing to me now but a graveyard of bad memories. Then why go? He asked, resting his chin on top of my head, his arms tightening around me like a vice. Because I brought that child into the world, I whispered. I was his mother for 5 years. Even if he broke my heart, I can't just let him turn into a monster when I have the power to stop it. It's 1 month, David. Just 1 month. Host, please don't worry about the time. The system interjected, its electronic voice remarkably softer than I remembered. I can adjust the temporal flow. A month in the novel's universe will pass in a literal fraction of a second here. To your husband, you won't even blink. I relayed this to David. He pulled back, looking into my eyes, searching for any trace of hesitation. Finding none, he exhaled a long, shaky breath and kissed my forehead. Okay, go be a mom, Sam. But the second your 30 days are up, you come home to us. Dinner will still be warm. I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. I promise. I closed my eyes and spoke to the system. I'm ready. Send me back. The warm, yellow glow of my kitchen dissolved into a blinding white light. The sensation of gravity vanished, replaced by a momentary, sickening weightlessness. There was a rushing sound in my ears, like a train barreling through a tunnel, and then the heavy, suffocating scent of polished mahogany, old money, and chilled air filled my lungs. I opened my eyes. I was standing in the grand foyer of the Sterling family manor. It was dead of night. The oppressive silence of the house pressed against my eardrums. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 7 years ago. The sweeping marble staircase, the crystal chandelier casting fragmented shadows, the antique Persian rugs. But it felt like a mausoleum. Host, the system whispered in my mind. You are in your original body from this world. When you vanished 7 years ago, Arthur tore the city apart, looking for you. He eventually convinced himself you had been kidnapped, then murdered. He has kept this estate in a state of suspended animation ever since. Leo is in the library down the hall. I took a breath, feeling the strange familiarity of my old limbs. I was dressed in the simple jeans and sweater I had been wearing when I left David's kitchen. I walked slowly down the cavernous hallway, the thick rugs absorbing the sound of my footsteps. The library doors were slightly ajar. A single desk lamp cast a pool of amber light into the darkness. Sitting in a high-backed leather chair was a boy. He was 13, but he looked older. He wore a crisp, dark dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing thin, pale forearms. His face was a striking mirror of Arthur's, sharp jawline, straight nose, and dark, brooding hair. But it was his eyes that made my breath hitch. They were dead, voids of obsidian, staring blankly at a complex architectural model he was casually dismantling with a pair of silver tweezers. He wasn't just taking it apart. He was methodically crushing the tiny, intricate pieces, his face completely devoid of emotion. Leo, I said. The tweezers froze. He didn't jump. He didn't gasp. He simply sat there in the heavy silence for 3 agonizingly long seconds before he slowly turned his head. When his gaze met mine, his pupils dilated slightly, but his expression remained as cold as a frozen lake. He stared at me for a long time, scanning my face, my clothes, my posture. Another hallucination, he muttered, his voice a low, raspy baritone that hadn't fully settled yet. He's the one who drinks, but I'm the one seeing ghosts now. Pathetic. He turned back to the model and snapped a tiny wooden pillar in half. My heart ached. He thinks I'm a ghost. I stepped fully into the room, my shoes clicking softly against the hardwood border. I'm not a hallucination, Leo. Put the tweezers down. His shoulders stiffened. He dropped the silver tool onto the desk with a sharp clatter. Slowly, he stood up. He was tall for his age, already nearing my height. He took a step toward me, his hands balled into fists at his sides. You've been dead for 7 years, he said, his voice flat, though I noticed a minute tremor in his jaw. You walked away from the car. You vanished. You never came back. I know, I said softly, holding my ground. But I'm here now. He suddenly lunged forward, his hand snapping out to grab my wrist. His grip was bruising, desperate, as if trying to prove I was made of mist. When his skin met mine, feeling the warmth and the pulse beneath my veins, he violently flinched and shoved me backward. How? He choked out, the calm, detached villain persona cracking instantly. His chest heaved. How are you alive? Where have you been? Why didn't you come back? For me. Before I could answer, a sudden, horrifying sound shattered the silence of the manor. It was the sound of glass shattering, followed by a guttural, inhuman sound, like a wounded animal dragged from the depths of a cave. Leo, who are you talking to? The voice from the doorway was unrecognizable. It was hoarse, entirely stripped of the arrogant, icy timbre I remembered. I turned. Standing in the doorway was Arthur Sterling. If I hadn't spent years intimately memorizing his face, I wouldn't have known him. The billionaire heir, the immaculate, untouchable second male lead who had looked down on me with such cold indifference, was gone. His hair was overly long and unkempt, streaked with premature silver. His cheekbones protruded sharply from a gaunt face, covered in a shadow of stubble. He wore a rumpled dress shirt half unbuttoned, and he smelled overwhelmingly of scotch and despair. He stared at me. His bloodshot eyes widened so far I thought they might tear. His lips moved, but no sound came out. The tumbler of amber liquid slipped from his limp fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor, splashing alcohol over his bare feet. He didn't even flinch. Samantha, he whispered, the name tearing from his throat. I looked at him, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no love, no resentment. Just the mild pity one feels for a stranger in pain. Hello, Arthur, I said evenly. His knees literally buckled. The great Arthur Sterling collapsed onto the floor, ignoring the shards of glass cutting into his skin. He crawled forward, scrambling over the ruined floor until he reached my feet, grabbing the hem of my jeans with shaking, bloodied hands. You're alive, he sobbed, pressing his face against my knees, his body shaking violently. You came back. You finally came back to me. God, Samantha, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll marry you. Tomorrow. Tonight. I have the ring. I've kept it in my pocket for 7 years. I fired them all. I banished Chloe. I burned it all down. Please, just don't leave me again. It was pathetic. It was the ultimate grovel of the arrogant male lead who realized too late what he had lost. Had this happened 7 years ago, perhaps I would have cried. Perhaps I would have felt vindicated. Now, I simply took a step back, forcing his hands to fall away. I'm not here for you, Arthur, I said, my voice cold and crisp. Get off the floor. You're traumatizing your son. Arthur froze, looking up at me like a beaten dog. I turned my attention back to Leo, who was staring at his father with a mixture of intense disgust and deep, buried terror. I have 30 days, I said, looking directly into Leo's eyes, ignoring the sobbing man at my feet. I came back to spend 30 days with you, Leo, because I heard you were losing your way, and I will not allow a child I raised to destroy his own life. The first week was a battlefield. Arthur's mental state was terrifying. The system explained that my abrupt disappearance 7 years ago had triggered a psychotic break. He had chased away Chloe within a month, finally realizing that the female lead was nothing but an idealized phantom in his head, whereas I had been the flesh and blood woman keeping his world spinning. He had poured millions into private investigators, eventually convincing himself I was in hiding. When he finally accepted I was real and truly standing in his house, he became suffocating. He locked down the estate. He fired all the male staff. He had security cameras installed in the hallways. He followed me like a shadow. standing silently outside my bedroom door at night, just listening to me breathe. I ignored him entirely. My focus was Leo. The boy was a fortress of ice. He refused to speak to me for the first 3 days, locking himself in his room or the library. He was brilliant, frighteningly so. He traded stocks, read philosophical treatises on nihilism, and spoke to the remaining staff with a cruel, calculating venom that made my stomach turn. He was mimicking the worst parts of his father and his grandparents, using power to insulate himself from pain. On the 4th day, I cornered him in the dining room. He was eating breakfast alone at the massive, empty table. I set a plate of homemade pancakes in front of him. They were slightly uneven, the edges a bit too crispy, just the way I used to make them in our tiny apartment before the Sterlings took over his life. He stared at the plate. I don't eat sugar in the morning. I have a private chef for my macros. Eat the pancakes, Leo, I said, sitting across from him. Or what? He sneered, looking up with a mocking smile that didn't reach his eyes. You'll leave again? Go ahead. The door is right there. I am leaving, I said calmly. The mocking smile vanished. His jaw clenched. I told you on the first night, I continued, pouring myself a cup of black coffee. I am here for 30 days. Then I am going back to my home. This is your home, he snarled, slamming his fist on the table, the silver cutlery rattling. He owns everything. You're his. You're mine. You don't get to just disappear and pop back up to play mommy. I am not his, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, steady register. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the mahogany table. And you do not own me, Leo. I have a husband. I have a 6-year-old son named Noah. I have a career, a home, and a life that I love very much. I fought hard for it after I left this place. The silence in the room was absolute. I saw Arthur standing in the shadows of the doorway out of the corner of my eye. I had known he was there. I wanted him to hear it. I heard a choked, strangled gasp from the shadows, followed by the sound of retreating footsteps. Leo's face went completely ashen. He looked like I had just driven a knife into his chest. A husband? A son? Yes. You replaced me, he whispered, his voice cracking, shedding the 13-year-old villain facade to reveal the broken 5-year-old underneath. You replaced me because I told you to go away. Because I picked Chloe. My heart shattered. So that was it. That was the seed of his darkness. He had carried the guilt of my disappearance for 7 years, believing his childish, manipulated words had killed his mother. I stood up, walked around the table, and pulled his rigid, trembling body into my arms. He fought me for a second, pushing at my chest, but I held him tight, pressing his head against me. No, Leo. No. I murmured into his hair. I didn't leave because of you. I was sick. I was dying. The doctors said I only had months to live. I left to seek a miracle treatment far away from here. I couldn't take you into that nightmare. I loved you too much to let you watch me die. It was a half-truth, but it was a kindness he desperately needed. Leo went completely still. Then, a raw, guttural sob tore from his throat. He buried his face in my stomach, wrapping his long arms around my waist, crying with an intensity that shook his entire body. I'm sorry, he wailed, the sophisticated vocabulary evaporating. Mommy, I'm sorry. Grandma told me to say it. She said if Dad married Chloe, he would be happy and he'd come see me more. I didn't mean it. I didn't want her. I stroked his hair, tears silently spilling down my own cheeks. I know, baby. I know. It wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault. After that day, the dynamic shifted entirely. Leo clung to me, not with the toxic, suffocating obsession of his father, but with the desperate hunger of a starving child. We spent the days in the gardens, walking through the city, or just sitting in the library. I taught him how to apologize to the staff he had mistreated. I made him take down the complex financial monitors in his room. You're 13, I told him, closing his laptop. Go play a video game. Be stupid for an hour. For the first time in his life, he laughed. A real, genuine laugh. The system chimed happily in my head. Host. Target Leo's villainization meter has dropped by 80%. His psychological profile is stabilizing. You are performing. A miracle. But as Leo healed, Arthur deteriorated. Arthur couldn't handle the truth. He couldn't digest that I belonged to another man, that I had carried another man's child, that I woke up every morning in another man's bed. He began drinking heavier. He would corner me in the hallways, his eyes wild and bloodshot. I can kill him, Arthur whispered to me one evening in the corridor, his breath reeking of liquor. Whoever he is, I can make him disappear. I can adopt the other boy, Noah, right? He can be a Sterling. You don't have to go back to him. Samantha, please. I pushed him away, repulsed. Listen to yourself, Arthur. You are pathetic. You had me. I gave you my youth, my dignity, my body, and you treated me like trash. Because I wasn't born with a trust fund.
You don't love me.
You love the idea of possessing what you threw away. I love you, he screamed, dropping to his knees, clawing at my clothes. I love you. I was a fool. I was blind. I'll give you the company. I'll give you my
life.
Just stay. You can't leave me here in this hell again. I am leaving, I said, stepping out of his grasp. And if you truly love Leo, you will let me go peacefully. Look at what your madness is doing to your son. Arthur looked up, tears streaming down his face, and saw Leo standing at the end of the hallway. The boy's eyes were no longer cold and dead. They were filled with profound pity and disgust. Arthur wept, burying his face in his hands. Day 29. The month was almost over. Tomorrow night, at precisely 8 p.m., the system would pull me out. I was packing the few things I had bought during my stay, some books, a hand-drawn picture Leo had made for me. The door to my bedroom opened. Leo walked in. He looked at the small duffel bag on the bed. His jaw tightened, but he didn't cry. He had grown so much in these 30 days. The cruel, detached air was gone. In his place was a thoughtful, deeply scarred, but healing young man. You're really going back to him, Leo said softly, sitting on the edge of the
bed.
I am, I said, sitting beside him. David is a good man, Leo. And Noah, he's a good kid. He'd like you. Leo looked down at his hands. Can I come with you? My heart squeezed. You can't. The rules of my travel, they don't allow it. You belong to this world. And honestly, Leo, you have a purpose here. Your father's empire is immense, and right now, it's corrupt and broken. You have the mind to fix it. You can be better than him. Leo was silent for a long time. Finally, he looked up at me, his dark eyes clear and resolute. He's not going to let you go. He doesn't have a choice. Mom, Leo said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He fired the gate security. This morning, he locked down the mainframe. The blast shields on the windows have been engaged. He thinks if he traps you inside, you physically can't leave. I sighed, rubbing my temples. System, is this going to be a problem? Negative, host. Dimensional extraction bypasses all physical barriers. At 8 p.m. tomorrow, you will dematerialize. However, Arthur's psychological state upon witnessing this might result in a complete catastrophic breakdown. Let him break. I thought back coldly. I have a plan, Leo said, leaning in. Tomorrow at 7:45, I'm going to trigger the estate's fire suppression system. It will force the blast shields open and unlock the doors. When the chaos starts, I'll distract him. You run out to the gardens. I don't want you to be trapped in here with him when you leave. I want you to go out under the open sky. I looked at my son, tears welling in my eyes.
He was helping me escape. He was
letting me go. The ultimate act of love. Leo. It's okay, Mom. He smiled, a sad, beautiful smile. You saved me. Now it's my
turn to save you.
Go back to your family. I'll be fine here. I'm going to fire his board of directors when I'm 18 anyway. I laughed, pulling him into a tight embrace. I love you, Leo. I will always, always love you. I love you too, Mom. Day 30. 7:45 p.m. I stood in the grand foyer, holding my small bag. The house was eerily quiet. Arthur was pacing at the top of the staircase, holding a remote control, looking wildly paranoid. He hadn't slept in days. You're packed, Arthur muttered, descending the stairs slowly. Why are you packed? You can't leave. The doors are sealed. The windows are sealed. You're
staying.
We're going to be a family. Arthur, it's over, I said, checking my watch. 7:47 p.m. Suddenly, a blaring alarm shattered the silence. The strobe lights of the fire system flashed blindingly white. With a massive mechanical groan, the heavy steel blast shutters over the estate windows began to retract. Arthur panicked.
No.
What's happening? The system is hacked. Dad, Leo yelled, running out from the hallway, grabbing Arthur's arm. There's a fire in the West Wing. The servers are melting down. Let go of me, Arthur roared, trying to push past Leo to get to me. But Leo held on tight, leveraging his growing height and strength, tackling his father back against the staircase railing. Run, Mom, Leo shouted over the alarms. Go. I didn't hesitate. I pushed open the heavy mahogany front doors and sprinted out into the cool evening air. The massive iron gates at the end of the driveway were slowly swinging open. I ran down the gravel path, the crisp wind whipping through my hair. Behind me, I heard Arthur screaming my name. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated agony. I stopped near the fountain in the center of the gardens and turned around. Arthur burst through the front doors, staggering down the steps, his face a mask of absolute terror. He was reaching out for me, sprinting across the gravel, his expensive shoes slipping. Leo walked out onto the portico behind him, watching calmly. Samantha, please, Arthur begged, closing the distance. He was 10 feet away, 5 feet. I looked at my watch. 7 hours, 59 minutes, and 58 seconds. I looked past Arthur, meeting Leo's eyes one last time. I smiled and mouthed, "Be
Good.
Leo nodded once. Arthur lunged for me, his hands outstretched to grab my waist. Extraction initiated. The system chimed. Arthur's hands phased right through my body. His momentum carried him forward, and he crashed face first into the gravel, where I had been standing just a millisecond before. The last thing I saw in that world was Arthur Sterling, broken and screaming in the dirt, clutching nothing but empty air, while his son stood tall and whole on the steps of the manor, finally free from the ghosts of the past. A rush of wind. A blinding light. "Sam?" The voice was close. The smell of crushed garlic and onions filled my lungs.
The
kitchen was warm. I blinked. I was standing in exactly the same spot, my arms still loosely wrapped around David's waist. David was looking down at me, his eyes wide, holding his breath. Did you go yet?" he whispered, his voice trembling. I let out a breathless, wet laugh and buried my face into his chest, holding him so tight he grunted. "I went," I sobbed, tears of sheer relief flooding down my
face.
"I went and I came back. I'm home, David. I'm home." The cutting board still had half-diced onions on it. The clock on the microwave hadn't even changed its minute. David dropped the knife on the counter with a clatter and wrapped both of his arms around me, burying his face in my neck. He didn't ask what happened. He just held me, anchoring me to reality, to the life I had chosen. From the living room, the sound of tiny footsteps pattered across the hardwood. Noah, our 6-year-old, bounded into the kitchen holding a plastic dinosaur. "Mommy, Daddy, can we go to McDonald's now?" he chirped, oblivious to the metaphysical journey that had just concluded in his kitchen. David and I pulled apart, looking down at Noah. I wiped the tears from my cheeks and smiled, a deep, profound peace settling over my soul. "No McDonald's tonight, buddy," I said, crouching down to poke his nose. "Daddy's making his famous spaghetti, but I promise this weekend we'll go anywhere you want." Later that night, after Noah was asleep and David and I were lying in bed, the system's voice echoed in my mind one final time. "Mission report, host. Arthur Sterling has been institutionalized. The company has been placed in a trust until Leo comes of age. Leo is thriving.
He has
Enrolled in a normal high school at his own request. He made a friend today." I smiled in the dark, resting my head against David's steadily rising chest. "Thank you, system," I thought. "Goodbye. Goodbye, host. Have a beautiful life." The electronic hum faded away, leaving nothing but the quiet, comforting sound of my husband's breathing. I closed my eyes, entirely content, and for the first time in my life, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep.